Hi, this is Lisa Klein, and I'm here for another episode of The Curve with Lisa Klein, which we're also going to be calling Who Really Cares? And I'm here with Dr. Michael Radkowsky, who I adore, who is brilliant and very helpful right now for a lot of people. Yay, yay. And we're going to have another discussion about, pandemical related things. So take it away, Michael.
Why is it called The Curve?
Oh, funny you should ask. So when the whole pandemic thing hit, I was listening to a lot of music, and I've been into the Talking Heads lately, and I heard a song that I hadn't heard in years, probably 10 years, called The Great Curve. And David Byrne came out with a Broadway musical called something American Experience something, and he was on SNL, and he performed two songs that were extraordinary. And so I downloaded the album, and the last song was The Great Curve. And it's all about how the world has a lot going on, and that there's a woman or women are bringing in like the light. So it's like a time where there's a lot going on in the world, and we need to bring in the light. And it was all about women and women bringing in the curve. It was very interesting. So that was like the first week of pandemic. What?
Did I get points? You first. You first.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm hoping I can bring a little bit of light.
I'm sure you've already you bring light every day, Michael.
Thank you again.
Every day to all your patients.
So do you, Lisa.
Thank you. I tried.
Yes.
So what would you like to talk about today?
Today I would like to talk about acceptance because it's a huge issue that can either make our lives hell or make our lives not quite heaven, but a lot better than hell, depending how we play it. Curious?
Okay. I'm curious.
I think about this issue a lot because I work a lot with couples and also with individuals who are in relationships. And I watch people basically do the equivalent of beating their head into a concrete wall over the fact that their significant others are different from them and get upset, outraged. How can they think like that? How come they don't see it my way? I can't believe this, etc., etc. And I always tell people what I'm going to tell you and our wonderful audience, hi, now, which is that that's life. Everyone's different, no matter how similar you might feel to your significant other or other people you're close to, because this applies to friendships and other relationships as well. You're also going to be different in some really big ways, and you can't get someone else to see it your way any more than they can get you to see it their way. And the key to dealing with all the crazy differences that are going to come up over the course of a lifelong relationship, or just a long relationship, is to accept that the only person you really have power over is yourself. You might have some influence, and I always say you can advocate for what you want, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get it from someone else. But over yourself, you have a lot of power. So what I'm basically saying is that we have to accept that we have limited power over everyone, more power over ourselves. But I mean, as we're living this pandemic world now, we're seeing that some things are just to a large degree beyond our control.
Well, I think it's interesting because you and I were talking before we started that there are almost a lot of parallels between relationships and even friend relationships, all kinds of relationships, and the pandemic, because we're in a situation that we can't control. And we see it's heartbreaking because every day, something happens, it seems. We're hearing about all these restaurants in DC that are closing and not reopening. And I know that's whatever, but it's a big deal.
People's lives.
Yeah, these are people's livelihoods. Their whole businesses are going under. And so, I think when we started back in March, we're all just like, okay, let's see how this goes. But everybody was just shaking it day by day. And I think now what we're seeing is that, this isn't going to be over anytime soon. I think people are really getting into a major funk, or just like, okay, how do I deal with we're like in a war. It's like, how do we deal with a longer term situation? And again, you and I spoke about this, I think, on the first video. We've never had to do this before.
Yeah.
We haven't really known hardship, really, you know. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we've been lucky. So
Yeah. Yeah, some things are just beyond our power. Sad to say, we can't save the world except for whoever out there is working on the vaccine, right? But we have some power, right, to help others. I mean, you pick restaurants. I know that's many other businesses besides restaurants, but that's one of the businesses that we love and care about, our neighborhood restaurants. And we can do our best to patronize them if they have takeout. It might sound like I'm being silly, but what I'm really saying is that we have some power to do good in the world and work for things that we care about. Of course, it's not just restaurants, it's all sorts of other businesses. It's being a volunteer in different ways to help people as much as we can help anyone else right now. But it's overwhelming, right?
but
So
how
that's the
are,
example. Yeah. Go
well, we
ahead.
talked before, I think when everybody was in the crisis of it, like we're going through all these different stages. In the beginning, it was just the shock and the disbelief of, and the fear and the panic and terror over the whole thing. And now
Yeah.
we're kind of settling into like a slog of crap. You know, it's like, how do we, how do we deal with this for the next, however long this is going to be? Like, what types of tools? I was watching a cute video. These two moms have a little cute video thing that they do, and they're like, yeah, in the beginning, they're like, okay, we're gonna do crafts, we're gonna do the clock, you know, da da da, and they're just like, whatever, you know, kids, the, you know, the kitchen is, the cupboard is your buffet, eat whatever you want, you know. So how, what do we do to get through this? Like, how do we get to a better state of acceptance? Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
What are some
Yeah.
strategies we can do?
Well, let's start with the big one. Acknowledge, and this is not a one-time thing, that you have limited power to change the terrible predicament that our whole planet, including every one of us, is in right now. So that means it makes little sense to beat your head against a wall, lament, cry about how things used to be, or what isn't, or what's gone, or live in the future and think how things might be one day, and then you still get to live with regret all the time. You basically have to, if you're going to get through this with some sanity, I'd say, accept that what is, to use a cliche. It is what it is. But once you do that, it gives you some power to make the most of what actually are the circumstances.
Did you get a haircut? You got a haircut, right?
I did get a haircut.
That's awesome.
It was a little scary, but I went in at 9 a.m. There were no other customers there, so I wore my mask the whole time, and
Good.
I look much better than
Yeah,
it's going to
I'm going on Wednesday. That's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it, because none of us really have these tools. It's like we're in a continuous state of, you know, adapting. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, when this first happened, we put out all the videos about, you know, panic and terror, you know, so I think a lot of us have moved through that. I mean, now there's a lot of grief, I think, over the things that are being lost and that may not come back. I mean, it's tough to think of, you know, what a new normal may look like and then how long this may go on for.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I think another way of saying acceptance is what can we do to keep our heads above water? Now, then I think some of your audience may be people really struggling with losing their business or, you know, all kinds of hardship. And what does that mean for them? They might think, well, what are you talking about? I can't just accept what is, but it might, for example, mean accepting that there's no point pouring in more money into your business. If it's going to go under, it's going to go under, which might be a helpful move to make, or it might mean accepting that things are really tough and I may go down to a certain level of how much money I've got left, but I am going to do my best to keep it afloat, but know that it may not actually work. But I'm going to accept that this is a crazy tough situation and I can only do my best and I don't know how things will work out. I have to let go of the result.
You're making me think for some reason of my grandfather and how they, people came over from Italy, where people came from in the early 1900s, and most people left where they were because it was not great. So I'm just thinking about how familiarly and, genetically and generationally, we are wired in a way to adapt. Somebody was saying it's incredible how all of a sudden everybody was staying home, and they wore masks, and then like, it's incredible how resilient and how all of us are like, okay, not everybody, but most people, which is good. So, we've had these new things imposed on us, and most people have been willing, in DC to follow along, which is great.
Yeah.
But what do you think, what types of tools do you work with your clients on to move through some of those emotions? Like if they're feeling overwhelmed with grief and terror, panic, like how do you, because we do it with the hands, but how do you work with your clients on moving through those emotional states so that then they can go into more of an action like thing? Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Well, I'll answer your question, but first I want to say I'm really struck by what you said about our ancestors. And it's true, a lot of them just decided that life wasn't going to work out for one reason or another in the country that they were living in. They were going to go off to a new start. And I think about my own ancestors, most of whom I think left their parents behind in the old country and a lot of their siblings, and how scary that must have been to think they'd never see them again. So yeah, when you think about that, I think that you could say for a lot of us, our hardships pale by comparison. I don't mean to say that some of your listeners aren't going through really awful times right now, but it's part of the human story, isn't it? Generation after generation. Like we talked about the other time, we thought we were going to have an easy run in this life, and this is what we have to go through. So to come to your question, I'll say that one of the good things about therapy is that it gives people a place to talk about whatever they want to talk about, which includes all of the feelings of loss and grief and terror and rage. And sometimes just talking about those things can be helpful just to feel better, just like having a good cry releases emotion. And some of your viewers may not be in a position to find a therapist right now, so I'm hoping that you can talk to a friend or family member, but be careful because they may be in a similar tough situation, not be able to give you support right now. Again, that's one of the good things about therapy is you have someone to talk to who does not have their own issues that they want to talk about, and it's my job is if they're overwhelmed by whatever people have to talk about.
I mean, I think it's
part two. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Please.
Well, I feel like one of the things that's come out of this is that our lives have gotten a lot smaller because we're kind of contained. Like I used to travel all the time. Yeah. You've had the baby, so your life has been a little bit more contained anyway, but like I'm all over the place all the time. I'm in New York, I was supposed to be in Hawaii. And so it's interesting to sit, like you have to just sit in your space. And I mean, I have a massive amount of empathy for people who are going through massive hardship. I mean, we've been very lucky so far that where businesses are going, which is thank God. But at the same time, like, personal relationships have gotten more important. Family relationships have gotten more important. So it's kind of an interesting time in history where it's like somebody pushed in the pause button where we all have to focus on these relationships more. Kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
So going into that, but I'm just gonna segueing back into what you were saying. Part of being in a nurturing, loving relationship is that the person can hear what you're saying emotionally.
But not always, right?
Or not, okay.
You can't always count on the other person to be there for you in the ways that you would like. I'm glad you brought us back to acceptance, although I want to get back to a few more things people can do to deal with
Totally, yeah.
But let me talk to your point just now, because it's really, really important. This is one of the things that drives people crazy. You're supposed to be there to meet my needs. I hear this over and over again. And actually, they're talking about having a really good parent when you're small. Your parent's job is to be there for you and meet your needs. But once you're past a certain age, it's your job to meet your needs, and your partner's not there to meet your needs. They're not there to be a perfect parent. Sorry to let people down who are listening, but this does not
How
mean.
do you meet your needs? What do you mean? What do you mean specifically?
I mean, needs
And
are
what do
things
you mean?
like air, water, shelter, things you need to be alive. Other things
Yeah.
are wants, right? And you can want the other person to be there. And of course, in a relationship, it's a great idea to do your best to be there for your significant other when they, I'm trying to not say when they need you, but sometimes, you know, they do need you. Okay. So take me with a grain of salt about the needs thing. I'm saying that the things that you really want someone to be there for, it's not essential that they do it. You will live if you don't get it from them. That's what I mean.
Well,
But if you
don't people need connection and support? Do people need love?
sure they do, but you may not always get it from your spouse. And in the moment, you're not going to die if you don't get it. So if you're, I'll say significant other, but a spouse, close friend, whatever, think about it. In the moment when you really want them to be there for you, what if they're having a really tough time? You've got to find a way to be able to take care of yourself in that moment, to soothe yourself, which can include finding someone else to talk to. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying, yes, it's a lovely thing when people are there for each other, and relationships work best when people generally are. But at times, the other person may not be able to be there.
So are you seeing with your client population, because I know from myself and my friends, like everybody's reaching out to like their high school friends, their college roommates. People are connecting with people they haven't connected with in years because it's like we have the time. So are you seeing that in your patient population too, that people are kind of becoming chattier and making these other connections?
Yes. And at the same time, I think usually those other connections don't provide the really deep support they get from someone who you're really close to. But it's a wonderful thing to feel more connected to people who you haven't seen and who you have ties with, and rekindle those connections. And that can be wonderful and help support you. But to spend an hour crying to someone who you haven't spoken with in 30 years, you know, maybe asking a lot of the person, but you never know.
Whatever.
What do you think?
Yeah, I can see that. So, okay, so it's good to have more than one person who you're close to then, if the one person, if your spouse or significant other sometimes is not really available or whatever.
Yeah, and that's acceptance. So tying it back to today's theme, it means accepting that the other person may not always be there for you when you want them to be, just as you may not be able to, for whatever reason, be there for them whenever they may really need to talk to you. Again, I'll say this because I love being repetitive about important points. It's a good idea to be generous. It's a good idea, a great idea, to be there as much as possible for your significant other. But can't always count on that happening. That's acceptance. And then what do I do instead to take care of myself? I'm putting my arms around myself to take care of myself in this moment.
So like journaling, meditating, exercising.
All those things, talking to other people, eating well, and coming back to the points you made earlier, because I thought they were fascinating, just recognizing that what we're going through is part of life, that there's no, sad to say, law that says that we're entitled to have had an easy time of things. And recognizing that this is one of my favorite things in the world, this concept I'm about to state. I think I've said it before with you. Giving meaning to your suffering helps you to endure the suffering, right? So if you can say, I'm likely going to get stronger if I can hold myself together and stay above water, and whatever other metaphor I could come up with about that, the better, the more I work on doing that now, the better I will be able to do it in the future. I will become stronger if I can get through this. So that is just a helpful way to, it helps you to keep going if you can keep in mind this is making me stronger.
You're reminding me, I treated a little boy this week who's 6, and he had an adult N95 mask on, which are not comfortable. So the poor thing, and I was like, you know, sometimes life is not comfortable. You just have to, I'm like, watch the movie, watch the movie, watch the movie.
Yeah.
That was probably not the right thing to do then. I'm like, you're not always going to be comfortable.
Yep. And this is a great opportunity to get used to it.
Might as well learn that when you're sick. Um,
Poor kid.
I know, it's horrible.
I'm sure you helped him a lot, though.
I don't know. So maybe I have to apologize for that now. But yeah, that's interesting, the finding meaning in the suffering, because I think I've been wallowing in the suffering a little bit. I mean, I'm working. I mean, I'm doing everything I'm doing a lot of things. But I think sometimes when you get overwhelmed, it's easy just to kind of be like, watch Netflix. I think that's a more advanced kind of concept. You think that you're finding meaning in the suffering that you're having.
Yeah, well, those things have their place, right? But
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of people also, this may be a time, you may be surprised to hear me say this, but to seek out some sort of spiritual comfort as well. We're going through such a crazy time. This is just me, but I find myself more drawn to some of the spirituality of my upbringing and rituals and things that, even if I don't believe in them 100%, I find them very comforting, and they help me feel connected to where I come from. And there's something, when you said before about thinking about our ancestors and where they came from, the stories they had, I feel more connected to them. That's most I can say about it. So some people may take comfort in some sort of spiritual practice as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that could be very helpful. But yeah. I mean, I guess it's on my mind. I found a bunch of pictures that my mom had given me years ago that are still in the envelope, and it was my
Mm-hmm.
grandparents, and it was
Mm-hmm.
wild to see them and just to think back about, again, what we've had to deal with versus what they had to deal with.
Yeah.
And like, okay, this is, it stinks, but it's an interesting thing though, because it's the whole world. A virus is a very, what's the word? Common equalizer, where
Yeah.
it's like a universal equalizer.
Yep.
And, it's not how much money you have. I mean, it unfortunately is hitting the lower economic people worse, but generally it's, an equal opportunity virus, depending upon as long as it gets access.
Right.
So I can't think of any time in history we've had this type of common, foe. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's historical, and maybe there can be some comfort for some of us in that also, right? It didn't just happen to us. This is just part of the human story, and it's something to be living through, right?
Totally.
And speaking again about acceptance, lamenting about it, right? Being upset, there's not that much point. I mean, of course, uh, I'm going to now say the exact opposite. Of course, it makes sense to be upset about all the losses that so many people are enduring and deaths. But at the same time, only lamenting about it doesn't help us to move forward and survive. I'll put it
Yeah.
that way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to do, and other people I know, they're trying to find like the magic or the gifts of the situation. What does it mean that we're traveling less, we're staying home more? Like I'm learning, I'm cooking, I'm exercising more. Like,
Yeah.
trying to take the benefit of what does this time mean in the longer term, and try and, I guess that's part of finding meaning in suffering, but also making the best of a situation in a way.
Yeah. Looking for the good things that come out of it, which isn't true for everyone, right? Let's again acknowledge that some people are really having an awful, grim time. But
Yeah.
for a lot of people, you can find things, right? I think I'm sure I'm spending more time with my 6-month-old son, and we're certainly eating better. I'm coming home earlier, and we're having very good meals, and it's great to be present for the formative first months of his life as much as
Yeah,
we are.
great.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah. It'll be funny, not funny. It'll be, interesting for him to look back at the baby pictures and see the conditions that he spent the first months of his
Yeah,
life with,
really.
everyone in masks and such. Yeah.
Kind of wild.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Uh, I know I'm here as your guest, talking about how I see acceptance as a helpful concept. And again, I'll reiterate, because as I said, I love being repetitive about important points. It doesn't just mean accepting what is. it means accepting that we have limited power, right? We have more power over ourselves, less power over others in big situations. So it is a great idea to do what we can, but also acknowledge that there are limits to what we can do. But I wonder if this concept has any relevance to you in your work that you do.
For the body.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a ton of research about the immune system and how it's secondary to what's going on in the rest of your body. And there's this thing called the neural endocrine connection, which is the neurological system and the endocrine system go hand in hand. So the more you're worried, stressed out, anxious, fear, all that, your nervous system gets a little wonky. So it makes it hard to think clearly and all that. So yes, the more you can go into a state of acceptance, you're actually going to be healthier in terms of, yeah.
Once again, I'm awestruck by the parallels in the work that we do.
Yeah, I just realized
every time we speak. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
I think the work that we do is probably not that dissimilar, right?
You use words, I use my hand. You know, we're on this. It's all about caring, right, Michael? Because we really care, don't we?
Well, yes,
we do. We do.
We aspire to care. It's true. Yes. Knowing you, I can say that you really care, and I aspire to really care.
Oh, thank you.
But I would say that beyond you using hands and me using words, we're also using, I think, our energy, right?
Well, people can feel it. I had a patient tell me years ago, she's like, you can't pay for someone to care about you. She's like, either a practitioner cares about you or they don't. Like, you can't buy someone's interest. That's what she said. And it was like, as a practitioner, I think that that's a huge part of the healing, which is that we actually genuinely care.
Yeah.
You know, so when somebody comes in, if like, you know, you're showing that caring, which I think is so vital right now in our world, is to show that level of care.
Yeah, that's so beautifully put. And I have to say that I think you've even met her, my wonderful mentor, Noelle, always says that when people say, oh, you know, I'm just paying you. And she says, well, you pay for my time, but you can't buy my heart. It sounds almost exactly like what you just said. Right?
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's really true.
Yep.
And you could, I mean, the patients feel it. I mean, the more that you truly care, even, you know, not in a codependent and meshing kind of way, but, you know, you care, you know, it's huge.
Yeah.
Very huge.
Yeah. So it's been a wonderful conversation.
Yes, thank you. I feel like we left it on an uplifting note.
Yeah.
That was good. There's a positive uplifting note there.
So wishing you a good week. I'm wishing all our listeners the best journey possible through this ongoing craziness that we're slogging through.
Yeah, I feel like we're going into phase 2. We're in phase 1 for it was like 3 months solid, you know, crisis, and now we're kind of going into like a subacute phase of phase 2. So we'll see what happens.
We will see. So I look forward to our next talk.
Me too.
Don't know when it will be or what we'll talk about. We always come up with interesting things, don't we?
We do. We totally.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Love you. Thank you for making the time.
Love. Thank you, Lisa.
Kiss Joshua for me.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye, hon.
Bye.